If an avoidant left you even though they clearly desired you, this isn't about you not being enough. It's about what your attractiveness triggers inside their nervous system. That is the sentence that pulls you out of self-blame, because the most confusing pain isn't rejection. It's being wanted and still being abandoned. It's watching someone look at you like you're rare, chase you like you're special, claim you like they're proud, and then suddenly withdraw like closeness is poison. That whiplash makes you question your worth, your body, your personality, your value, and you start thinking, how could they leave me when they were so into me? But for many avoidants, attraction isn't the issue. The issue is what attraction leads to. Attractiveness doesn't just create desire, it creates intensity, it creates attention, it creates stakes, and stakes trigger fear in an avoidant nervous system. Because the avoidant's deepest fear isn't always, I won't find love. Their deepest fear is, love will cost me control, expose me, or trap me. So when you are very attractive, and the chemistry is strong, the bond forms fast, and the world responds to it fast. People notice, people comment, people assume it's serious. Friends start asking questions. Social media lights up. Even if you're humble, your presence creates a spotlight around the connection. And for an avoidant, a spotlight can feel like pressure. Here's the key. Avoidants often confuse pressure with intimacy. They confuse being chosen with being trapped. They confuse being needed with losing themselves. So the stronger the attraction, the more intense the potential attachment, and the more intense the potential attachment, the more their nervous system may start screaming, danger. Most people think avoidants leave because they don't care. But if you've lived it, you know they can care and still run. What's happening is something more primal than logic. When an avoidant starts feeling attached, they don't always feel comfort. They can feel vulnerability. And vulnerability feels like being at risk. Because if you matter, you can hurt them. If you matter, you can reject them. If you matter, you can see parts of them they don't want seen. If you matter, they might fail you. So their body tries to prevent that future pain by creating distance now. That's why you can be good-looking and still be left. Because attraction makes you more important, and importance makes you more threatening to their defenses. Now let's go deeper into what triggers inside their nervous system actually means, because this is where your audience feels the truth in their chest. An avoidant nervous system is often wired to regulate through space. They calm themselves by pulling away. They feel safe when they don't have to answer to anyone's needs. They feel in control when closeness is optional. So when they're with someone who is highly attractive, the relationship can move quickly, not only because the chemistry is strong, but because the world reinforces it. Suddenly there are expectations. Are you too official? When are you taking the next step? You're lucky. Don't mess this up. Even unspoken expectations can become loud. And when expectations get loud, avoidants often experience it as pressure. But it gets even more personal than that. Highly attractive partners can trigger an avoidant's fear of being replaced, even if you've never given them a reason to doubt you. Because if you're attractive, in their mind you have options. If you have options, you could leave. If you could leave, they are not safe. And because avoidants often struggle to express insecurity in a healthy way, they don't say, I feel scared. They don't say, I need reassurance. They don't admit, I'm intimidated. They act like they don't care. They detach, they become cold. They create distance. They try to regain control. Leaving first becomes control. Leaving first becomes protection. Leaving first becomes a way to avoid being the one who gets left. So the title isn't about you being too beautiful. It's about you being too real of a risk. Too real of a vulnerability. Too real of a possibility of loss. The avoidant wants you, but wanting you makes them feel exposed. And they don't know how to hold exposure, so they run from it. And this is where your audience needs to understand a painful truth. Some people are drawn to the status of an attractive partner more than they're prepared for the responsibility of loving them. They want the high. They want the attention. They want the excitement. They want the fantasy. But when the relationship becomes everyday real, communication, consistency, repair, depth, they become overwhelmed. They start deactivating. They start focusing on flaws. They start convincing themselves something is wrong. Not because something is wrong with you, but because their nervous system is trying to lower intensity by lowering attachment. This is why avoidants can leave good-looking people and then later act regretful. Because once they leave, the pressure drops, the spotlight fades, the demands of intimacy disappear, their system calms, and in calm, they can finally feel what they shut down loss. That's when they miss you. That's when they feel the emptiness. That's when they realize your value. But realizing your value is not the same as having the capacity to keep you. So this keynote is not a comfort story to make you feel special. It's a reality check to stop you from self-blame. Because the most dangerous thing you can do after an avoidant leaves is start editing yourself. becoming less attractive, less expressive, less confident, less needy, less human, so you won't trigger them. That's how you become a prisoner to their nervous system. Your value is not the problem. Their capacity is. And once you accept that, you stop asking, how could they leave me? And you start asking, do they have the emotional skills to love anyone consistently when intimacy rises? That's the real freedom. Because attraction can bring someone to you. But only emotional maturity can keep them there. Stay to the end, because I'm going to expose the hidden reason avoidants walk away from high-value, good-looking partners, and it's not what your ego thinks. Most people, when they get left, want a simple explanation. The ego says they left because they're intimidated. The insecurity says they left because I wasn't enough. Both stories are seductive because they give you a conclusion. But the truth is more complicated, and once you understand it, you stop turning their behavior into a mirror that decides your worth. The hidden reason is this: avoidants don't run from your beauty. They run from the stakes your beauty creates. They run from what being with you would require of them emotionally, socially, and internally. They run from the vulnerability of having something they could actually lose. And that's why it looks so confusing, because they can be deeply attracted to you and still withdraw from you. Let's talk about stakes. When you are attractive and high value, people notice, and when people notice, expectations rise. Friends start asking where it's going. Family starts watching. Social media becomes louder. The relationship becomes real faster. Not because you pressured them, but because the world responds to the bond. The avoidant feels that reality like a spotlight. And for someone who is wired to regulate through distance, a spotlight feels like pressure. Here's what makes that pressure hidden: it doesn't always sound like fear. It often sounds like criticism. It sounds like you're too much. It sounds like, I need space. It sounds like, I don't know what I want. It sounds like, this is moving too fast. It sounds like, I'm overwhelmed. It sounds like, I'm not ready. Those phrases feel like they're about you. But many times they're about the avoidant trying to lower the stakes by lowering the attachment. Because attachment is the real threat for an avoidant, not attraction. Attraction feels exciting. Attraction feels fun. Attraction feels controlled because desire can be expressed and then turned off, pulled back, delayed, played with. But attachment, real attachment, has consequences. Attachment is responsibility. Attachment is consistency. Attachment is being emotionally reachable, not just physically present. Attachment is being held accountable. Attachment is being chosen back by someone who can actually leave. And that is where the avoidant nervous system starts activating escape. This is why the ego story can trap you. If you believe, they left because I'm too good, you might romanticize the leaving. You might think the relationship is destined. You might wait for them to return, ready. But if someone leaves because the stakes are too high, they don't become ready just because you're gone. They become ready only if they learn how to regulate intimacy and hold responsibility. Without that growth, they will keep doing the same thing with the next high-stakes partner. They'll chase the thrill, then run from the depth. Now, there's another hidden layer that most people don't talk about. High-value, attractive partners can trigger an avoidant's fear of being exposed. If you're attractive, the avoidant might feel like they have to keep up. They might feel like they are being evaluated. They might fear they'll be judged as not enough. They might fear you'll eventually see their emotional limitations. They might fear you'll outgrow them. And because many avoidants struggle to admit insecurity, they don't say I'm scared. They protect their pride by detaching. This is why you can be loyal and still be treated like a threat, not because you are untrustworthy, but because your attractiveness implies options, and options imply risk. Even if you've never flirted, even if you're committed, the avoidant mind can still feel unsafe around someone who seems desirable to others. The fear isn't rational. It's nervous system level. It's, if you matter a lot, I could get hurt a lot. So they try to avoid hurt by avoiding attachment. And here's the part that makes your viewers lean in. Sometimes avoidants walk away from good-looking people because they enjoyed the status of you more than they were prepared for the responsibility of you. They liked being seen with you. They liked being wanted by you. They liked the identity boost. They liked the rush. But when the relationship begins asking for emotional maturity, they panic. They can handle being admired. They struggle with being needed, because being needed requires presence, and presence requires vulnerability. So they start deactivating. They start finding flaws. They start creating narratives. They start saying things like, I'm not sure if we're compatible, or something feels off, when nothing is off except their fear of closeness. They might even say, you deserve better, which sounds noble but often masks the truth. I can't do what this will require. Now, here's the key point that makes this keynote powerful. Understanding this is not meant to make you feel special. It's meant to make you stop negotiating your standards. Because the second you start believing the leaving is about your value, you start trying to solve it by changing yourself. You become smaller. You become quieter. You become less expressive. You stop asking for reassurance. You stop asking for commitment. You become easy, hoping that if you lower the stakes, they'll stay. But that is how you lose yourself. The hidden reason they walk away is not something you can fix by being prettier, calmer, or more patient. It's something they have to fix by building capacity for intimacy. And capacity is shown in behavior, not desire. So the real question for your audience is not, why did they leave someone attractive? The real question is, do they have the emotional capacity to stay when intimacy gets real? Because attraction can pull them in, but only maturity can keep them present. And if you want to protect your life from the cycle, you stop chasing the ego answer or the insecurity answer. You stop asking, was I too much or too valuable? And you start asking the only question that matters, can this person love in a way that is consistent, accountable, and safe? Beauty creates a spotlight. More attention, more expectations, higher stakes. And for an avoidant, high stakes don't feel exciting, they feel dangerous. This keynote matters because it explains why the avoidant can look so confident, so calm, so in control, while you're the one feeling anxious and confused. It's not because you're weaker, and it's not because they're stronger. It's because the spotlight turns the relationship into a pressure cooker. And avoidants cope with pressure by escaping it. Most people think attractiveness should make someone hold on tighter. Like, if you have someone beautiful, you lock it down. That's how secure love often works. But avoidant attachment doesn't operate on that logic. Avoidant attachment operates on threat response. When the stakes go up, the avoidant system starts scanning for danger. And the danger isn't you doing something wrong. The danger is what the relationship now represents. Exposure, expectation, responsibility, being seen, being evaluated, potentially failing, potentially being rejected. A spotlight does that. If you are good looking, the world reacts. People notice you. People notice the two of you together. Friends comment. Family watches. Strangers flirt. Social media amplifies everything. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's loud, but the message is the same. This relationship matters. And if your relationship matters, then choices matter. Behavior matters. Consistency matters. And for an avoidant who is used to emotional freedom through distance, the idea that they now have to show up consistently can trigger panic. Because a spotlight doesn't just show you. It shows them. It shows their limitations. It shows their inconsistency. It shows their unresolved wounds. That's why the spotlight feels dangerous. Imagine an avoidant who enjoys the early stage, flirting, chemistry, being wanted, the thrill of the chase. Early stage is private fantasy. It's controlled, it's light. There's excitement, but not a lot of accountability. But as soon as the relationship becomes visible, as soon as it becomes something other people expect to last, their nervous system hears, no, you must perform. No, you must commit. No, you must be consistent. Now you must become someone who can hold a real partner. And if they don't feel capable of that, the spotlight becomes suffocating. This is why you'll see avoidants do strange things when they're with someone very attractive. They might start being hot and cold. They might start pulling away after a good date. They might pick fights over small things. They might suddenly need space when nothing bad happened. They might disappear after intimacy. They might become vague about the future. They might avoid labels. They might avoid being seen together too much. They might sabotage at the exact moment things are going well. Not because they aren't attracted, but because attraction plus stakes equals fear. And here's the part most people don't realize: fear can look like indifference. Fear can look like boredom. Fear can look like criticism. Fear can look like, I'm not sure anymore. Because avoidants often don't label what they feel as fear. Their system moves into deactivation. They shut down feelings to regain control. They start focusing on flaws to reduce attachment. They start telling themselves stories to justify distance. We're not compatible. Something feels off. I'm not ready. This is moving too fast. Those stories aren't always lies. They are often protective narratives created under stress. Now, the spotlight does one more thing. It amplifies the avoidant's fear of losing you. When you're attractive, it's easy for them to assume you have options. That assumption doesn't have to be true. You can be loyal, humble, committed. But their nervous system doesn't respond to your intentions. It responds to perceived risk. Perceived risk says, someone like you could leave me. Someone like you could replace me. Someone like you could choose better. And that triggers a very specific avoidant defense: leaving first. Leaving first is a way to avoid feeling powerless. If they leave, they don't have to be left. If they detach, they don't have to be rejected. If they create distance, they don't have to admit they care. The spotlight makes the fear of being rejected feel more intense, because the imagined humiliation is more intense. Everyone will see I wasn't enough. So they escape to protect pride. This is why you can be good looking and still be treated like a threat instead of a treasure. Because a threatened nervous system doesn't behave like love. It behaves like self-protection. Now, here's the reason this keynote keeps people watching. It answers the question that's been tearing them apart. Why did they leave when it was going so well? It's because so well meant so real, and so real triggered so risky. But I need to make the most important point here. Understanding the spotlight is not permission to tolerate disrespect. It's not permission to keep waiting. It's not permission to keep shrinking. It's simply clarity. Clarity gives you the power to stop personalizing the leaving. Because when you know the spotlight makes an avoidant nervous system feel exposed, you stop chasing with your ego. You stop trying to prove you're safe. You stop trying to dim your own light so they can stay. You stop becoming less attractive, less expressive, less alive, hoping it will calm them. You don't dim yourself to fit someone's fear. You require someone who can stand in the spotlight with you. Because the real relationship isn't the one where they desire you. The real relationship is the one where they can hold you when stakes rise, when attention increases, when intimacy gets real, when life asks for consistency, not just chemistry. Then the pedestal turns into pressure the moment intimacy becomes real, needs consistency, commitment, their nervous system activates. Escape as relief. This keynote matters because it explains the exact moment the relationship shifts from, "They want me so badly," to, "They're suddenly distant." And if your audience understands this, they stop blaming their beauty, their personality, or their worth. They start seeing the pattern for what it is, a nervous system choosing safety over closeness. In the beginning, an avoidant can treat you like a dream. They can idealize you. They can be attentive, charming, present. They can make you feel chosen. And if you're attractive and high value, the idealization can be even stronger because you fit a fantasy. You represent excitement, status, pleasure, novelty. You represent the thrill of being with someone others would want. And that fantasy feels safe for an avoidant because fantasy is controlled vulnerability. It's closeness without full exposure. It's intimacy without daily responsibility. It's connection without the hard parts that require emotional skill. That's the pedestal. And the pedestal feels good to you at first because it feels like admiration. It feels like passion. It feels like, finally someone sees me. But there's a hidden danger in a pedestal. It's not the same as being known. Being admired is not the same as being held. And avoidants can be very good at admiration because admiration keeps things elevated and light. It doesn't require the deep, grounded, consistent presence that real partnership requires. Now here's the turning point. The moment the relationship asks for real intimacy, not just chemistry, but consistency, communication, planning, repair after conflict, emotional presence on ordinary days, the pedestal starts to feel like pressure. Because real intimacy changes the rules. Real intimacy says, show up even when you're tired. Real intimacy says, talk to me when you're uncomfortable. Real intimacy says, be accountable when you hurt me. Real intimacy says, make space for my feelings. Real intimacy says, choose me in the mundane, not just in the exciting. And for an avoidant nervous system, those requests can feel like demands. Not because they're unreasonable, but because the avoidant hasn't built the capacity to stay present through emotional discomfort. Many avoidants learned early that closeness comes with overwhelm, criticism, or engulfment, so their body associates intimacy with danger. So when the relationship becomes real, their system doesn't interpret it as love deepening, it interprets it as threat rising. This is when escape becomes relief. It's important to understand what relief means here. Relief is not happiness. Relief is the removal of pressure. Relief is what your body feels when you stop holding your breath. So when an avoidant feels pressured by intimacy, the quickest way to get relief is to create space. They pull away. They go quiet. They become busy. They delay plans. They avoid serious conversations. They nitpick. They start focusing on flaws. They start telling themselves stories like, maybe we're not compatible. Something is off. I need to figure myself out. This is moving too fast. Those stories are not always conscious lies. They are often nervous system justifications. Their body feels anxious, so the mind finds a reason to make that anxiety make sense. And the easiest reason is to make the relationship the problem. Once the relationship is the problem, withdrawal feels logical. It feels justified. It feels clean. This is exactly why you can be perfect on paper and still get abandoned. Because avoidant leaving isn't always about you being inadequate. It's often about intimacy becoming too real for their capacity. Now, your audience needs to hear how this shows up in real time, because that's what makes them feel seen. It often happens right after a peak, right after a deep conversation, right after a weekend together, right after you express feelings, right after you ask, where is this going? Right after you bring up a boundary, right after you ask for more consistency, right after you say, I need you to show up. That's when the avoidant system hears, now you're needed, and being needed can feel like losing freedom, so they escape to get relief. And you, as the person who loves them, experience it as whiplash. You think, did I do something wrong? Was I too intense? Should I have waited? Should I have acted cooler? And you start shrinking your needs to keep them. That's the tragedy. Because the more you shrink, the more you reinforce the avoidant belief that intimacy is negotiable, and your needs are optional. This keynote is powerful because it shifts your audience's focus from, how do I be more desirable, to, how do I stop being trapped by the pedestal? Because if someone only loves you on a pedestal, they love the fantasy version of you, not the real version. And real love requires room for reality, your needs, your emotions, your boundaries, your humanness. Now, this doesn't mean every avoidant is doomed. Some people can grow. Some people can build capacity. But the key is they must be willing to do the work when intimacy triggers them. They must be willing to communicate instead of disappear. They must be willing to stay in the conversation instead of escaping. They must be willing to create a plan for what they do when they feel overwhelmed. Because the pedestal to pressure shift is where the truth is revealed. Do they only want the high of you, or can they handle the realness of you? Do they only want admiration, or can they do accountability? Do they only want excitement, or can they do consistency? And your audience deserves to know this. The goal is not to be someone who never creates pressure. The goal is to be someone who refuses to accept a relationship where normal intimacy is treated like a threat. Because the right person doesn't run when you ask for basic love. The right person becomes more present. Here's the shocking part: the more valuable you seem, the more it can trigger their fear of being exposed, not enough or replaced, so they leave first to feel in control. This keynote matters because it explains why the avoidance exit can feel so personal and so insulting, like a deliberate decision to throw away something good. But what you're often witnessing is a defense mechanism that protects the ego from the very vulnerability you inspire. They don't leave because you're low value. They leave because being with you makes them feel like their value is at risk. When you are attractive, confident, emotionally intelligent, socially desired, or simply someone with standards, you represent stakes. And stakes trigger a specific kind of fear in someone who is avoidant and insecure underneath their independence. They may look calm, detached, even arrogant, but beneath that can live a quiet terror. What if I can't keep up? What if I disappoint them? What if they see the real me? What if they realize they can do better? What if I get left? And rather than admit those fears, they move into the only safety strategy they trust: distance. This is why it can feel like the better you are, the worse they treat you. Because your value becomes a mirror, and mirrors are uncomfortable for people who are hiding from themselves. Your stability highlights their inconsistency. Your emotional maturity highlights their shutdown. Your standards highlight their avoidance. Your options highlight their fear of being replaced. So the avoidance system tries to reduce that discomfort the fastest way it knows how. It lowers attachment by withdrawing. Now let's unpack the fear of being exposed, because this is where the dynamic becomes cruel. Exposure is not about looks. It's about emotional visibility. When you are high value, you often come with clarity. You ask honest questions. You notice patterns. You don't easily accept vague behavior. You can feel when something shifts. You want communication. You want consistency. And for an avoidant, that kind of clarity can feel like being seen too deeply. Being seen deeply is dangerous if you're carrying shame. Avoidants often carry shame they don't talk about. Shame about needing people. Shame about not knowing how to do intimacy. Shame about their emotional numbness. Shame about their fear. Shame about their inconsistency. They might not label it as shame, but they feel it as discomfort whenever closeness increases. So when you, a person they value, comes close enough to see them, their mind panics. If they see me fully, they'll reject me. And because their ego cannot tolerate that risk, they detach. The fear of being not enough is the next layer. High-value partners raise the internal bar. Not because you demanded perfection, but because your presence makes them want to be better, and wanting to be better can awaken the fear that they can't. This is where avoidants often start sabotaging. They pick fights. They get irritated by small things. They suddenly become busy. They stop planning. They stop being consistent. Then they blame the relationship. Because if they blame the relationship, they don't have to admit the truth. I'm scared I can't be what this requires. And then comes the fear of being replaced. This one is deeply tied to attractiveness and social visibility. If you are good-looking, people may flirt with you. If you're charismatic, people may admire you. If you're successful or confident, people may desire you. Even if you are loyal and committed, the avoidant nervous system can still interpret your desirability as risk. And risk makes them want to regain control. So they do the most controlling thing disguised as detachment: they leave first. Leaving first is control because it flips the vulnerability. If they leave, They don't have to wait for you to leave. If they discard you, they don't have to face the humiliation of being discarded. If they detach, they can tell themselves they were never that attached. If they exit, they can protect the ego story. I didn't lose you, I chose to go. That story gives them power, but it's a fragile power. It's not real confidence, it's avoidance. And this is why the avoidant can look cold when they leave a good-looking person. They are protecting pride. They are protecting identity. They are refusing to stand in the vulnerable position of caring more than they can control. That's why they often act like the breakup doesn't affect them, because admitting it affects them would mean admitting you mattered. And if you mattered, they were at risk. Now here's the part your audience needs to hear to stop romanticizing this. Leaving first doesn't mean they're strong. It means they are fear-driven. And fear-driven love is unstable. Fear-driven love comes close when it wants comfort and pulls away when it feels responsibility. Fear-driven love may return when it's lonely, but it retreats when intimacy rises. So if your viewer is thinking, they left because I was too good, I want them to hold that truth carefully, because it can become a trap. It can make you feel special while you stay stuck. It can keep you waiting for their realization. It can keep you hoping your value will eventually wake them up. But your value is not a lesson plan. Your value is not a tool for someone else's growth. The real takeaway is this: the more valuable you are, the more you must require emotional maturity. Because your value deserves stability. Your beauty deserves respect. Your love deserves consistency. And anyone who leaves first to protect their ego is telling you something important. They don't yet have the capacity to hold a high-stakes love without running. So your power is not proving your value harder. Your power is refusing to be punished for it. Your power is holding a standard that says, if you want someone like me, you don't get to love me halfway and leave whenever fear rises. Because the right person doesn't leave first to feel in control. The right person learns to stay present even when it feels scary. In the final part, I'll give you the one calm sentence that instantly reveals whether they're capable of real growth, or just craving access to you without responsibility. This keynote matters because it's the difference between getting pulled back into the same cycle and finally ending the confusion. Most people don't get trapped because they're naive. They get trapped because they're emotionally honest. They believe the words. They believe the feelings. They believe the apology. And when you've been starved of clarity, even a little warmth feels like a miracle. But the problem with avoidant dynamics is that warmth can appear without maturity. Missing you can happen without change. Desire can come back without responsibility. So if you want to protect your viewers and keep them engaged to the end, you give them something powerful, not another theory, but a test that reveals truth in real time. Here's the sentence, simple. Calm. No drama, no begging, no anger. What will you do differently next time you feel overwhelmed and want to pull away? That's it. This sentence is a mirror. It doesn't attack them. It doesn't argue the past. It doesn't demand perfection. It asks for one thing only: capacity. It asks whether they can recognize their pattern, take ownership of it, and create a plan for when the same trigger shows up again. Because the avoidant problem is not that they leave once. The avoidant problem is that they use leaving as regulation. They use distance as relief. They use silence as control. So the real question is never, do you miss me? The real question is, can you stay when intimacy gets real? Now watch what happens when you ask that question, because their response will tell you everything about their readiness. If they are craving access without responsibility, they will resist the question. They might give you vague comfort words: I don't know. I'll try. I promise it won't happen again. They might get annoyed. Why are you making this serious? Why are you bringing up the past? Can we not do this? They might guilt you, so you don't trust me. You're being cold. You're punishing me. They might pressure you to move faster. Just let's be good. Let's not overthink. I miss you. Isn't that enough? That resistance is not just defensiveness. It's the pattern fighting to survive. Because the pattern depends on fog. Fog lets them return without being accountable. Fog lets them reset without repairing. Fog keeps you hoping while they keep control. If they are capable of growth, they will engage the question with specifics. They might say, when I feel overwhelmed, I will communicate before I shut down. I'll ask for space with a time frame. I'll stop disappearing. I will come back and talk even when I'm uncomfortable. I've realized I deactivate when I feel pressure, and I'm working on that. I'm getting help, reading, learning, trying to build better skills. They won't make your question the enemy. They will make the pattern the enemy. That's the difference. A growing person doesn't fight your boundary. They align with it. But even if they answer well, there's another layer your viewers need, because words can still be performance. The real proof isn't the first answer. It's what happens when you hold your pace. A person who is only craving access wants immediate closeness. They want full emotional availability now. They want to hold you back quickly, warm, open, forgiving, reassuring. They want you to soften so their discomfort stops. So if you say calmly, I'm open to talking, but I'm going to move slowly and I need consistent effort, they will become impatient. They will withdraw again. They will punish you. They will say you're difficult. They will flip it so you feel guilty for asking for safety. And that is the biggest red flag, when your need for safety is treated like a problem. A person who is genuinely growing will respect your pace. They will not pressure your healing. They will not interpret your caution as cruelty. They will understand that trust is not a button you press. It's a bridge you build. And building takes time. They will show up tomorrow. They will show up next week. They will show up when the moment isn't emotional anymore. That's how you tell real growth from a moment of longing. Now, how do you stay open-hearted without losing yourself? You don't do it by becoming colder. You do it by becoming clearer. You keep your heart open to love, but you close the door to patterns. You stop giving full access to someone who has not demonstrated full responsibility. You stop over-explaining your standards. You state them once and you live them. You stop making your peace dependent on their moods. You build a life that doesn't pause when someone disappears. You stop making their regret your validation. You validate yourself by how you protect your time, your energy, your dignity. This is where many viewers feel their power come back. Because the truth is, good-looking, high-value people can still get trapped, not because they lack value, but because they have empathy. They see the wound behind the behavior and they keep giving chances. But empathy without structure is how you get used. So the final part is not, how do I make them value me? The final part is, how do I filter for maturity? And that one sentence is the filter. What will you do differently next time you feel overwhelmed and want to pull away? If they can answer it, and then live it over time, you have something to build. If they can't answer it, or they punish you for asking it, you have your answer too. Because someone who truly values you does not demand access to you without responsibility. They will gladly meet you in structure, because structure is not punishment, it's what safe love is made of.